So thank you all. It's great to be here. Thanks to Arends, a very great guy. We've met before. We had a very nice coffee meeting the other time when I visited AfriForum months back, and we had very nice conversations about the affairs of the country and you know, how we can move South Africa forward. So it's an honor to be here. I think what you guys have done with this conference is that you've really, you know, arranged it or put it together at the right time, right? I mean, you spoke very nicely, Arends, that there is that sort of discourse against BE now, right? Race-based policies. There is that sort of, you know, people out there who are opposed to the idea, right? Which I'm going to take you through that as I'm going to speak. I see even the opposition parties, I sense a few of them who are saying, or I see a few of them who are saying, look, the race-based policies is not what South Africa needs. And DA has been very good in leading the charge. And of course, there are others that are opposed to the whole idea. And then, of course, we mark 30 years of our democracy. So that, again, makes gatherings like this very important now. Because, I mean, this is the time where we need to question everything. And that is what I've been talking about on social media, in some of my media interviews. This is the time where we should be now questioning as to are the things that we have been doing, you know, beneficial to our country on economic growth, on fixing our education, on fixing our communities that have been on the collapse. Our cities and towns over the years, they have been collapsing. So these are the questions now we should be asking. And I think your chart, Martin, is very nice, the chart to show there. That shows that, you know, that upward trend in terms of race-based policies. So I think your chart is very, very powerful. And it sort of, it makes us reflect as to where we are. And when we were presenting that, I was thinking, I mean, how has all those laws been beneficial for the country, right? In improving educational outcomes, right? Have we managed to create a society where we have competitive education, a society where you know, we create more jobs, we have a stronger job creation, a society where there are more entrepreneurs? How is that a plus if the goal is to create such an environment? How is that helping? That's what I was reflecting on, Martin, when we were talking about this slide. How is this a plus for our people? Because when you look at the data, by almost every metric, just not long time ago, there was a report that showed that at least 81% of young people learn at grade 4 level. They can't read for meaning. Now that's a big fact. That's huge, folks. In a world where you have to be competitive if you want to become a society that is wealthier, right? You've got to have your education right. You have to get those things right. You know, you see even by international metrics on education, it's not good. The unemployment rate that we have is the highest in the world. I wish you mentioned Arends, I do believe. And most of the impacted people, it's young people. They are the people who are most impacted by the joblessness that we see in the country. Criminality. The World Bank says that crime takes away about 10% of our GDP annually, 10% of our economy annually. That is the crime problem that we face as a nation. So how is that what you showed, Martin, there? How is that a plus to our socio-economic standing, right? So those are the things that we need to question now and start questioning the policies that we've had in place. I mean, the Generation Z guys who were born after 1994. I mean, if a white young person born after 1994, why should they be discriminated against? It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, but even if they were born before, you want to create a non-racial society, right? So then pursue policies where you will ensure that you want to grow the economy. So really, I love this conference. It came at the right time, and I think that, as Arends is saying, the momentum is with us now, the people who have been opposing this for years. And I've always argued that if you were to repeal BE tomorrow, or race-based policies, I assure you, I bet with my life, that we are not going to see the riots and the protests in poorer communities across the country. You are not going to see that. Or people reacting, upset and, causing chaos, protesting that BE has been ended. You are not going to see that. But the people who would make noise are the people who are right at the elite level, mostly the black elite. Because I'm going to show you now, they have been the beneficiaries of these policies. The people who have made big money, people who have really gotten rich, as Anthea Jeffrey has written a lot of the Institute of Race Relations, are the top people. And by the way, which is what I'm going to talk about, that seems to be the case even in many countries where what's called racial affirmative action has been tried. That it's always the elite at the top of that group that has been targeted to be the beneficiary of those race-based policies. It's always the top richer people who are the beneficiaries. So there seems to be a pattern, as Thomas Sowell studied this thing, the whole world, the impact of what affirmative action is and what the implications are. Now let's get into my presentation now. This was just an opening for you. I'll come to the detail. Okay, triple BE. I usually call this thing BE, right? I mean, for me, that's what I call it. I think it's called broad-based economic empowerment now, or broad-based black economic empowerment. And I was thinking, Arends, that we should have, I should have titled this slide, the pitfalls of race-based policies, because this is more what we're talking about, race-based policies. But anyway, I will go with this title for now, because I think we all know what we're talking about. Now, as Arends was saying, so there is that negativity toward these policies, that even some people within the ANC itself, they see that this whole thing has been quite destructive, right? So there is Barbara Hogan, one of the ministers in the ANC, saying BE must be amended. I think it was 2-3 years back. Kotongwana as well, he has put in some requirements. Minister repeals SOE's BE requirement for white-owned companies, simply because it's affecting even within the SOEs, where you've had many people leaving the SOEs because they don't feel like they are part. In fact, they are being discriminated against. So you've lost many skills there, which is one of the reasons why SOEs have really sort of have been collapsing over the years or under the ANC. So he has gone as far as trying to amend those rules then, which, by the way, the amendments aren't enough. You have to scrap everything if you want to really make some serious positive impact. And then there is one there, it's official, that's from a DA, and I've commended the DA for this. The DA has been brave enough to say, look, we are anti-BE as a political party, right? We don't believe in... Other political parties, they've said that, but some they've been quite funny because they propose some other thing that is, that is just BE in another name, But they've been very brave over the years to say there will be no BE transformation policies should the DA be elected into governance. We hope that if they were to be elected, they would do that. Because what happens now is that politicians, when they campaign, they say something else, then they go do something else, right? So, and then we see Moses Mbeki has been a long-time critic of black economic empowerment. I've met him, he and I participated, I was honored to sit next to him at a panel discussion last year. And he has been excellent in saying that black economic empowerment, or affirmative action as he calls it, is not something that South Africa needs. And he has even gone as far as saying things like affirmative action are for the minorities, not for the majority. That the majority are the beneficiaries of affirmative action. That to Moses Mbeki doesn't make any sense, right? Now he has been asked, okay, but then what do you think we should replace it with? Moses says that, I'm not saying that there should be no programs to help the needy. By the way, that's my position as well. Of course, we have to have programs, that's fine, programs to help the people who are disadvantaged. I don't have an issue with that. But don't help them according to their race. You help them according to their socio-economic conditions, right? And that's what Moles Mbeki has been saying. And I think he has a point there. But even those programs that I would favor are the programs where we empower the poor people, right? In other words, we empower them to be participants in the market. You don't want to spoon feed them. You want to give them the necessary skills and the ability to be competitive in the market. That's what you're looking for, right? You can do those things with things like the voucher systems, which the RRS has proposed. I think the Free Market Foundation has proposed something like that as well over the years in terms of healthcare and education. Because what you are doing with those things is that you are empowering the people to be participants in the market. So if you want to help, fine, but don't help people according to their race. Help people according to their socio-economic needs. So there has been the discourse now. Arons is right, and that has been my observation. And I have said that these things of race-based policies, it's a matter of when, not a matter of if, that they would be at some point repealed. All you would need is that you need political forces to change. Hence, my political analysis over the past months as we go to the election is that I would love to see what you can call, or at least in the South Africa's sense, what you can call a classical liberal sort of spectrum of politics getting stronger, right? I would love to see that. Though, of course, they may disagree on various things, but I would love to see organizations like the IFP, you know, the DA, you know, Action SA, you know, Freedom Front Plus. I would love to see these guys sort of getting more stronger, because not that they are entirely pro-market, but they are largely at least open to addressing things like this in a sensible way. So if we can have those guys getting stronger in our politics to counter the very much huge leftist movement of the ANC, of SACP, of COSATU, and so on, of the EFF, of the MK party, right? Because all those, if you combine all those political forces, they are still very much massive in the country, and they outnumber people like you and I in the country, who are largely, you know, pro-market and at least are against with these ideas of race-based policies. So if we can see that drive, or the liberal guys getting stronger and reshaping our political environment, that would be the first step as we go to the journey of addressing these race-based policies. Okay, so I've given you that. And then, of course, there was Westbury residents' protest over the amendments to Employment Equity Act. This was the colored community. I think this was last year or so, where they were saying, we as the colored community, we feel we are being excluded with the new Employment Equity Act. Now, this is not surprising that the people who feel that these laws are negatively impacting them, that they take to the street or to the streets, it's not surprising. I'm going to show you, I'm going to speak a bit about some where affirmative action has been implemented, or race-based affirmative action has been implemented before, and there were similar dynamics where you cause, and this is what in his book and some of the elements of this presentation I borrowed from Thomas Sowell's book, Affirmative Action Around the World. Because he went through various countries, Thomas Sowell, Malaysia, Nigeria, and so on, looking at what the impact of race-based policies, what they are. Now, what was interesting is that his findings were exactly the stuff that we are going through here. That's what Thomas Sowell found when we were studying affirmative action around the world. Because his last section in the book is the patterns. What are the similar patterns that he discovered when he studied affirmative action in those countries. And amongst the patterns was exactly this, where there is that social tension and or tensions, and there is clash between ethnicities or cultures or racial groups because of such policies. So that was one of the factors that Saul discovered. So this is not surprising, right? Then of course we have many within the white community in South Africa who themselves feel they are being left out of the system, and many of them. What I have observed is that you've had many sort of people within the white community who are saying, let me rather, send my child born after 1994. Let me just send my child to get education in the USA or UK or whatever, or wherever, because I think they have greater opportunities there than here, right? And many of these kids, they're very much gifted people intellectually. These are the skills we could use a lot in this country, yet they get sent away. Again, now, when it comes to the patterns that Thomas Sowell discovered when it comes to affirmative action, one of the things he discovered was that the people who feel excluded in the system, they go away, they leave the country. Right? That's what he discovered in Malaysia as well when he started affirmative action there. The people who felt that they are discriminated against, many of them who had the skills that would have been helpful for the people of Malaysia, many of them left. We have seen those trends taking place in South Africa, and that is not a plus for us. And then we have Starlink, must be 30% owned. Yeah. Starlink must be 30% owned by historically disadvantaged groups if it wants to operate in SA. In other words, it's fine. We can have 40+ unemployment rate, a GDP growth of less than 1%, growing below the population growth rates, our economic growth. That is fine. We can live with that. I mean, it's fine. This guy can go because he doesn't want us to get 30% of his share. By the way, who's going to get the 30% in your view? It's going to be the black elite. The guy in the Soweto streets or my township where I come from in Stenga, they're not going to benefit. They won't benefit anything. It will be the elite. And that elite is likely to be associated or closer to the ANC, the ruling party, right? Now, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. You would rather say millions of people who are plus 11 million people. I think it's plus 11 million, around 11 million people who are unemployed in the country. It's fine. They would rather stay at home and have no jobs, be hopeless. We can't allow such investment to come here unless the company is 30% owned by the historically disadvantaged people who will be the black elite, right? What plus are you making there when we are enriching the already enriched people? That's not a plus, right? In fact, you are creating something that doesn't work and that is negatively affecting the people. Now, let's move on from Starlink. Now, I've just spoken about where this thing has been tried. In Brazil, Lula, the socialist, who is the president now, last year he signed a law that says, he says that 30% of the people working in government, they must be black or mixed race, right? That's what Lula signed last year. I think it was early last year. That's the law he signed, or the executive order, something like that. 30% of the government workforce, or people working in government, they must be black or mixed race. So they've been doing that. And they also have the Minister of Race Equity or something. That's in Brazil. They do have that. And Lula is a big, as you know, he's very much a socialist. and he loves these ideas. And then also they've done it in Brazil, in college or university admissions, where they have set some reservations for black people and people of mixed race in Brazil. Even there, the whole idea is being challenged by some people, just like it's being challenged here, just like it's been challenged in many countries around the world. And again, even there, usually, in most part, the beneficiaries are people who come from the already, elite people. There was one statistic by, I think it was a Stellenbosch, University of Stellenbosch professor, who said that less than 5% of young people in university, only the poor students in universities, they account for less than 5%, the poor students. And he says that the reason for that is that most of the young people from poor communities, they cannot qualify academically to enter these universities. They don't have good education, right? They struggle to meet the requirements. So that is why, it's not that there's racism or the system is against a poor black person. It's because the standards you have on the ground in poor communities, black young people are not getting good education. So in other words, if you want to fix these issues, where you want to have this representation, you want to try and balance things, focus on right at the origin of the problem. And that is, you need to get education right in black poor communities. And that is the responsibility of government in shaping policy that advocates for, good educational provisions and outcomes right there. Because it's too late if you are going to be worried about, why do I have a few engineering students or science students at the university level? It's because you didn't fix the issue right there at the back. You didn't do that. That's why we have this. It's not some racist whatever system. It's because you failed. Now you are taking the affirmative action route because you know very well that you failed to address the harder part. Right at the back there. So easy for you to say, let me do what? Let me put in the race-based system just to look good, when in fact you are not doing anything really positive. India, they have, Thomas Sowell speaks about the untouchables. They are now called Dalits. These are people who are really right at the end. Decades ago, they pursued the same thing in terms of affirmative action. And the patterns were the same, Elites were the beneficiaries of such a system. Malaysia, this was more having to do with the Malays. Government was trying to help them, as the Chinese were more dominant in the systems. They were more in the academic institutions and in the economy as well. The government tried to put in the policies there, the race-based policies, to help Malays, Sri Lanka as well, the Tamils, and the Sinalis. It was the same thing, where the Tamils were more sort of economically dominant, wealthier, and then the government put in affirmative action policies to try and help the Sinalis. And what Thomas Sowell notes there is that there were many sort of tensions, and again, the people who benefited were largely the elite people within those groups that are targeted. Nigeria, after its independence, there were many policies there that were aiming to be put in place to balance things in different regions. Sowell's findings, they are the same there. USA, we all know it began way back in the 1960s with who's this guy? The guy was assassinated, Kennedy. So this thing of affirmative action came up from him, and then of course we have Lyndon Johnson, who cemented the whole thing. But it hasn't really, it hasn't been something that has helped black people. because Saul's argument is that much of the very much big problems are more internal within black communities rather than trying to mix match by race. And that has been quite negative. In fact, the debate in the United States has been so robust that up until last year, was it last year? I'm gonna come to here. There's a slide I show here. Last year, the Supreme Court said they are doing away with race-based admissions in colleges. So it's been a huge debate in America, right? This thing, and even there, the climate of opinion has been that it's moved toward, you know, that the whole thing does make sense. It does make sense. Hence, it was one of the reasons why this thing was gutted in universities, the admissions in universities last year. So the patterns seem to be the same. What you see in South Africa is not much different on what has happened in other countries around the world. There is no plus in this thing. The reason why politicians love this thing is because it makes them look, it's easier for them to put the laws and whatever regulations that make them to be seen as if they care about the people or the poor people. They fail to address the hardest stuff, which is educational reform in communities. And then they resort to race-based policies. Now let's look at South Africa's income gap. This slide here, since 1993, this is a nice chart by the Economist. Look at the people who have made most gains, right? So this would be the red bar there. It's mostly top 10% black people who have reaccumulated the wealth over the past years, all right? Even with BE, this is what has happened. And then we have the middle class, not that much. Then we have the bottom 50%, really on the negative side, right? So these policies have come through, and this has taken place, right? In fact, the Institute of Race Relations has raised something that is quite concerning, and I don't think they are the first one to raise this. That is, what's even more interesting now to look at, and maybe even kind of concerning, depending on how you see it, is that the wealth gaps within black people has risen, right? So the biggest gaps now is within the black community, where we have the black elite and we have ordinary black citizens. So this idea that it's always inequality is a racial thing, where you have white people at the top and the black people at the bottom. It's now within blacks. The high rates of inequality, staggering rates of inequality within the black community itself. So, and the RR is very good at raising that, because the inequality thing is still being, advanced as a racial thing. No, now the inequality is massive within the black communities themselves, right? So let's talk about ending BE. So how do we get there? So we already can see that there is the climate of opinion that is anti-BE. There are these voices, including here, Solidarity, including others within politics and some organizations, and the analysts. There are guys there who are saying, look, we need to do away with BE. Now, my argument is that in addressing South Africa's socio-economic issues, it takes two elements. People always think that the government should be the addresser or should address our socio-economic problems. Now, Jason Riley, who's a Wall Street Journal columnist, and he not long time ago, he wrote a biography of Thomas Sowell, the Maverick. When he was asked on a podcast, I think it was 2 years back, so what can government do to help black communities in America, to address their socio-economic problems? What can government do? That's what Jason was asked. And Jason said, no, it's not about what government should be doing or should do for black people. It's about what government shouldn't do. Our problems can't be solved by the government in our black communities. In fact, he wrote a book titled Please Stop Helping Us, where we are saying the government has been the one that has been instrumental in putting conditions and policies that have destroyed black communities in America. Now, when the podcaster asked him now, what should the government do? Jason said, don't do anything, leave us alone. Which is why I wrote the book. That's what he said. I wrote the book to say, no, it's not about what the government should do for us. It's about the fact that we are saying the government must stay away from helping us, from trying to help us, because they've destroyed us in terms of education, in terms of families with welfare being so destructive and so on. He says the government must stop helping us. Hence, I have reflected that to address our problems, it's going to take the government policy, of course, which is what we usually argue for. We want pro-market policies, we want strong economic growth, we want businesses to grow, less regulations. That's government policy. But also there are issues that can't be solved by the government. We as citizens, we need to address those issues. Right. Arends, you have been quite vocal about families, the importance of families. I think we overlook that. I've been quite vocal about that as well. You and I when we last met, we had a nice discussion about that. We need to, such things can't be solved by government. It's us as citizens. When I speak about the importance of families, people tend to say, oh, Phumlani now is trying to force whatever from government. No, I'm trying to say we as citizens, let's solve that. These are things that, much of our problems, we have to solve them as a people. Not government, us. These are issues we need to reflect about. And how can we as citizens address them? No, I'm not saying that government must come be to be the police of us as communities. I'm saying that let's think about this and see how we can resolve them as communities in the country. And my argument has been that there can be many policies, whatever that government can put through, or public policies. But if citizens, Thomas Sowell has said that all government can do is to create the conditions or make things like education be available to people. But he can't force, the government can't force people to take the initiative. Hence, I've spoken a lot about the importance of personal responsibility as private citizens. How to make use of the opportunities that are in front of us to make, a difference. How do we hold our leaders to account? One of the reasons why I'm in favor of a democratic process is that when things go wrong in a nation, you can point to the voters and say, well, but the leaders you have are a reflection of yourself as a society. You voted for these people. You put them into power to govern you. If you are going to spend 3 decades voting for the same people and your unemployment has gotten worse, crime is skyrocketing, your cities are declining, we are becoming less competitive in the global economy, and you are a democracy, then it comes back to you as the citizens, because you are the voter in the system. So all those things touch here. You can have government policy, but we as citizens, if we don't take that responsibility of being the driver of the destiny of our nations and of our fate as a people, as individuals, individualism, which is what Martin is an advocate of, then we are really not going to make much progress. So it takes public policy and, of course, private citizens who have to take initiatives and hold those people to account as well in a democracy, right? Which we are, at least to an extent. Now, what do South Africans think on race-based policies? According to the RR survey, 4.6% think people's lives can be improved through more BE and affirmative action in employment policies. 2.2% think this outcome can be achieved via more land reform. 15.1% say that affirmative action in employment has helped them personally. About 13% say they have benefited from BE ownership deals. 10.5% say they have been awarded BE tenders, and 11.3% say they have benefited from land reform, many of whom are likely to have chosen to have received cash instead of land. Because that's what's been happening since 1994 with the land restitution process. people have been opting to take cash as compensation instead of taking land, right? So there has been a lot of sort of land reform initiative by the government where people go and claim from the government, and people, at least 95% of the people, the claimants, they have chosen to take the money instead of the land itself. This is one of the arguments that are always used by the advocates of the people, usually from the left, who say that it's land, 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 and land, that's the issue, and so on. But I'm saying that people on the ground, they kind of disagree with you. There are things that they want. In fact, in many cases, in fact, the RR has done this research where they ask people what are the main issues that they believe the government must address. Usually land is at the bottom. Racism is at the bottom. I posted something on Twitter or X not long time ago where on ENCA, I think it was last week, on ENCA, they were in my province, KwaZulu-Natal, and with this bus tour that ENCA is doing. And then they spoke to, they interviewed people in Richards Bay. They asked a lady who's one of the small business owners and a gentleman who's young, must be in his 20s or so. The ENCA asked them, what matters to you? What do you want the government to address? What should be the priorities we need to get right? None of those people spoke about land, which supports the RR's surveys. Even I think, there's something called, is it Afrobarometer or something? They've done something like that as well. And the land thing and racism, it's almost, it's either not there or right at the bottom. People spoke about, we need jobs, we need water, right? We need support for SMEs. Those were the answers that those people interviewed in Richards Bay gave to the ENCA journalist, Sipamandla Koke, in KwaZulu-Natal, my province. That's what people said. But what matters to people is to how can their lives be improved. That's why they speak about jobs, they speak about about businesses, about education, about water. So those are the issues that we have to talk about. So as you can see here, as Anthea said, this is largely from her work as well. I mean, 85% of people, they don't benefit from BE. Only 15% do benefit, right? So it's, you can see all of this, most of this is all in the single digits. People who think that they have been, somehow the system has done them any good. So, and I'm going to repeat this. If you were to repeal such policies tomorrow, there would be no big outcry from poorer communities in the country or communities in large part. It would be the black elite who are in control of the media, of business and so on. All these big corporates and big, they would be the one in the black elite who would say, you know, why are you stopping with BE? Why? Because they've been the beneficiaries of the system. Okay, I've spoken about that. Let's skip that. So anything good about BE? I struggle to see. Now, here's one thing I need to mention to you, because it's what is, I'm going to tell you about my book shortly. I'll be quick, because I don't want to speak for too long. I don't like speaking for too long when I'm giving presentations. What I've been arguing to people, and there's a woman called Mary Lipton, I think she's based in the UK. She wrote a very, very fascinating book titled Capitalism and Apartheid, right? Capitalism and Apartheid. She's got very interesting numbers there. And I think there are other people who have such statistics. And when you talk about these people, many people, they say you are trying to downplay the effects of apartheid or the apartheid system. Before 1994, which is what I argue in my book, that is, yes, there were race-based policies and so on through the apartheid system. What I argue is that there were many black people who made use of what was available in front of them to better their lives, right? And that is what I praise with those people. That these people, there was personal responsibility, there was hard work, there was a sense of the family, there was a sense of wanting to be something. And they made use of what was in front of them to better their lives. That there were those classes of where you had a black middle class and you had people right at the bottom. Those classes, they still existed. Because, I mean, a person could do many things to improve their lives, including in entrepreneurship, where we had big guys like Richard Maponya, right? People could start from the bottom, improve their lives, and rise up. So those trends, even those trends that were there, where you had higher class, middle class, and right, even within the black communities itself, right? So what I've been saying is that even, in fact, Mary Lipton, she does something that is very interesting where she looks at the rise of professions during the apartheid era, black professions. In fact, the numbers was rising. The number of black people in professions was rising even before the apartheid era, right? Even before 1994, is what I'm saying. So you had that upward trend even in professions. The point I'm trying to raise with that, or my argument has been that without BE, without the apartheid policies, in a democracy where people can hold their account, you would have seen that trend still rising even faster, I do believe, because we would have removed any government barriers, remove all of them to allow people to be creators, to be innovators, to be entrepreneurs. You would have had that still, because that trend was already there even before 1994, of that rise of black people in professions. Now imagine 1994 comes, you remove all regulations, right? In other words, we reached that throw that you showed in your, was it late 90s, second half of the 90s, the throw of the chart. And you remove all the barriers that stop you from working. You give good, decent education to young people that is competitive, right? Why would you say would have been worse off? Why? Why wouldn't have been worse off? In fact, probably would have had more people being employed and more businesses being created. Because I've been arguing for what is called a transformation of creation. That's what I've been arguing for. Not transformation of redistribution, which is what is being favored a lot now. I've been arguing for transformation of creation. Let's focus on more creating, more entrepreneurs, more businesses, instead of, which is what I see, instead of being obsessed with the businesses that were founded by largely the white minorities. That has been my argument. That we must focus on the creation of businesses and create more than redistribution. That should be the focus. So, I mean, I'm going to repeat this. There's nothing wrong about saying we need to address the needs of the disadvantaged. Every society does that around the world. But we mustn't be, and both the private sector and the public sector can do that. But as usual, I largely favor the private sector. But it's fine, the government can do that as well, having those policies to help those who are in need. But it mustn't be on the basis of race. Replace BE with what? That's the question that you usually get. By the way, BE and employment equity and so on. Replace it with what? That's the main. But I've already answered that right now, which is what Moletsi as well is saying. I don't have an issue with us as a society trying to create conditions and programs for those who need them. I'm not opposed to that. Maybe there are people who are opposed, but in my circles, people I've worked with, I've never seen people being opposed to that. In fact, even the institutions I've been affiliated with, the RR, the Free Market Foundation, they've advocated for things like vouchers to help the needy people, right? To empower the people who are disadvantaged. So it's fine, you can do that, but don't do it according to race. In other words, you can have that program, whatever, but don't say we are going to help you, we are going to have race quotas or whatever. No. Say I'm going to help people who need help and who are gifted. That is fine, if you want to do that. Not to organize it according to racial basis, right? Now, I've had a lot of debates around this because whenever you say you are opposed to BE, the argument is that so you are saying people should not be helped. I don't know how many times I've repeated myself. I'm not saying that people should not be helped, whether it's by the private sector or the public sector. I'm saying that don't do it according to race. Do it according to the socio-economic need of a person. And stop being obsessed by saying we want to, oh, there is a white organization, Solidarity, AfriForum. How many people are sitting, how many black people are sitting in the board of that organization? How many black people are senior managers? Don't don't pay too much to that. Don't pay attention to that. Look at how many AfriForums have been created in black communities. How do you replicate what's being done at AfriForum and Solidarity into black communities? How to create more businesses in black communities? There's a lady, the CEO, one of the CEOs at Momentum. She says there are no financial black financial advisory firms. That's what she's saying. One of the CEOs at Momentum. How to create more insurance companies by black people, more black banks, more whatever. Create these institutions in black communities. Because that's what you want. A nation of creators, not a nation of. How do we look for a bank that was founded by white people, and how do we get into that bank and manipulate the management and so on to bring in more black people? And I mean, that to me, I don't think it's the right thing to do, right? It must be a nation of creators, not trying to redistribute that which is very much limited and small. It's not going to help us. Create more businesses, right? Okay, so more what I've told you, right? Much of the ideas that I have spoken about now are in my book, Lessons from Past Heroes. I do have 2 copies here. I've been speaking in a few conferences, so I've sold all my books. But I managed to get 2 copies here, so those who may be interested. So what I have done is to consolidate these ideas I'm speaking about in this book, right? And this book is written in a way that says, there's much that we can do to improve. The responsibility comes with us as a people of South Africa to bring change. Those 2 lines I showed you, there's policy, which the book says it must be pro-market, free market policies. We need more businesses. We need to create a society where there's innovation, entrepreneurship, and then there's the citizen part in this book. That's one element where we need to take personal responsibility. Investments and saving culture. There's a section about that. How do you foster that culture of investment and savings in our communities in South Africa, right? How do we create a society where there are stronger families, not weaker families, right? That's very important. Because all those things, they are a factor on our economic progress. How do we get education right? So these issues, this book acknowledges those issues and says that this is how we need to address them. You can't address our issues with race-based policies. We are going to only benefit the elite and have what? Rising unemployment rates, poverty. Half of the people have been poor, classified as poor for the past 20 years now, when you look at the Stats SA data. Where are the serious trends of downward in poverty? I mean, of declining poverty. The ANC was in Limpopo on Saturday doing the Siyanqoba rally in Limpopo. Limpopo has the highest poverty rate in the country. Yet they have been voting for the same party over the past 30 years. Yet you are the most poorest province in the country. So how do we reflect, how do we teach our people about the importance of democracy, which is what Prince Mashele has been highlighting a lot? To say, we need to understand that in a democracy, we hold our leaders to account. And we are where we are because we have chosen as a democracy. Hence, I've been arguing that if the ANC comes back again in this election with plus 50%, you can never tell me that we've lived over the... Do you know, Arends, what's happened over... You know these things over the past 5 years? Stage 6 blackouts. High unemployment rates. When Ramaphosa came in February 2018, the unemployment rate was 27%. Very much high, but then it rose under his administration to 32% now. On top of the official unemployment rate. Now, but some say, well, there was COVID. Well, but in the first quarter, which was first quarter of 2020, unemployment had already risen to plus 30%. This was before COVID lockdowns and so on. So the trends on unemployment have been disturbing. The meta rate. This country is a deadly country, right? They've skyrocketed. I was looking at another chart last week. I even posted it on my social media. A chart by Bloomberg showing the numbers of people who have been murdered in the country over the past just a decade alone. So all those things, joblessness, and then you are telling me that the ANC is going to get plus 50% in this election. What does that say about us as a society 30 years into our democracy? That should be the conversation now, Arends. What does that say about us? You're going to hear the analysts saying, well, it's because the opposition didn't provide, they didn't articulate themselves well. And so I hope they do invite me. Because I'm going to say to them, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We have many options. In fact, I would argue now, Martin, that our options are you have these left-wing organizations, far left, EFF, MK, ANC, and so on. But then you do have the DA and others on the other. Freedom Front Plus, Action SA, IFP, that are more care about this. You do have those options. So you can't find, of all these parties, you cannot find someone to vote for and put in to address the socio-economic challenges where the ANC has totally failed us. Something is wrong with our electorate. Something is very wrong with us. And gatherings like this, ladies and gentlemen, we must now start talking about us as a people and what we can do to improve our lives, right? And how, to what extent are we responsible for what's happening in the country? I would argue that at least 80% of what's happening in the country is us, right? In fact, almost everything is us. Cities and towns were better in the 90s. Many cities and towns, they are declining at a shocking rate. Who's been managing? It's us in democracy. And we don't want to change the leadership. Who should take responsibility? It's us. So those are the nature, that's what we should be, that's how we should be talking about now. How we should be talking 30 years into our democracy. Where are we now? Was that my last slide? Yeah, that was my last slide. So now, sorry I've spoken for too long, but this is, I think this is, we are speaking, we are gathered here this morning at the right time. And I think the conversation on things like this, the climate of opinion is changing. It's being against these policies now that don't make sense, even within the ANC's, even to some in the ANC elite, right? This is not making any sense. And over time, I do believe that we are going to win here. It's going to be, we are going to get to a situation where let's do away with this thing. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's going to get there. And I do hope that it's going to be, I'm hopeful that it will be within my lifetime. So remember also, to get a copy of yourself, for yourself, I do have 2 copies here, but also it's available in all bookstores across the country. Exclusive books, back-end books everywhere. I do travel and sign in those bookshops. My book is in those bookshops or bookstores. You know, we've got to change our mindset. This is the time to change our mindset. So thank you so much all. It's great. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I hope you learned something. I didn't bore you too much. Thank you so much.